All right, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulillah. So I get asked frequently by people, what are some tips or tricks, to learning Arabic, to gaining proficiency in the Arabic, and I do one of these videos maybe like I don't know once or twice a year. And so somebody was asking me the other day, like, "Hey, did you travel abroad? Was it when you were in Saudi Arabia that you learned Arabic? How did you do it?" So, one, alhamdulillah, I just happen to have a personality, as I usually like to say. I have a personality for language. I know a lot of times we always tend to try to equate things to intelligence, but personally, I don't think it has much to do with intelligence. I think it has mainly to do with a personality type that makes some of the arduous parts of learning a language more easy for myself because I just have a natural predilection and desire in that area. So I like reading. One, two. I love reading books on grammar. I love reading dictionaries. I love writing and expressing my thoughts in different languages. So when I was young, when I was around 9 or 10 years old, alhamdulillah, I taught myself Japanese as a kid and would get in trouble in school because I was always being accused of not paying attention. And one day, I think my parents got called up to the school or something, and they're like, "Hey, your kid's not paying attention in class." And I was like, "No, no, I am." And I said, "Look, I took notes." And she was like, "Well, what is this?" I was like, "Well, these are the notes from class, but I just wrote them in Japanese." And so, I just happen to have the personality for that. That being said, though, I've also taught Arabic several times over the last, 30 plus years. And I do have some insights that I'll share again that I think are helpful. So, one, there's no magical book. People always say, "Oh, what book do you have? What book are you reading from?" There probably are some differences between the books and their structures. I would say they're all probably about equally bad versus equally good, and I don't mean any insult, to the people that are writing those books. So you take, for instance, like the Medina series. It's okay book. Personally, though, I don't think it really it's not going to serve the Muslim student well, right? Because I think one thing that gets lost in the sauce here is, well, like for what purpose are you learning Arabic, right? Are you learning it to read the Quran? Are you learning it to be proficient and conversant in the field of Islamic studies, devotional Islamic studies and learning, meaning you want to be able to not only read the Quran, but maybe you would like to be able to read a book of fiqh, or you would like to be able to read a book written by a religious scholar on this or that topic. Now, obviously, that can, there's a massive data set there that can make it challenging because if you want to read the Quran, the nice thing about the Quran is that it repeats itself a lot. And so the topics that the Quran, for instance, are going to talk about are pretty limited, right? They're, especially if you compare the Quran to a book of fiqh. A book of fiqh is going to talk about a lot more things, even though obviously a book of fiqh is going to be based upon the Quran in a sense, but it's going to go into far more detail and granularity, and that's its own challenge. And then, of course, over time, different schools of thought, different scholars develop their own nomenclature, right? Their own istiraha, mustarahat, right? They develop their own kind of technical terms. And so you have to ask yourself, well, what is it that I want to read? And then two, in my opinion, most learners of Arabic, most Muslim learners of Arabic, so Arabic ASL, like Arabic as a second language, for the purposes of religious and devotional studies, are going to, they're going to be doing this for for those purposes. And what I mean is, they're not going to be going to the market and haggling over, the cost of gold, or, buying tomatoes. And that's all great. In fact, I was telling one of the younger people there the other day, like, I personally use every opportunity that I have to speak Arabic. Because living here in America, there just simply aren't many opportunities to speak Arabic. So when I'm at the masjid and some of the other, Arab brothers are there, even though they will speak in a wide diversity of dialects, you've got Palestinians, Syrians, Lebanese, Khaliji Arabs, some North Africans, even a few brothers from like Sudan. So there's like a really wide spectrum of dialects, or Egyptians. And yet I take every opportunity I can to speak Arabic. And I think what happens is that it's great to have all these, literary and intellectual pursuits, but to fully develop the language, it does need to come out of your head. You need to have it, come out of your head. You need to be able to express yourself. And so what I find is that students of Arabic almost never ever speak Arabic in any kind of public setting. And that could be due to shyness or lack of confidence. And so I remember one time when I was very young and I was eager to learn Arabic, and I had bought the Orange Book by, I think it was written by Peter Aboud and Raji Ramouni from University of Michigan. And so I went and bought this book and learned a couple sentences and then ran out. All right, cool. I'm going to run over to Dearborn because I'm from Michigan. And so Dearborn was there, and I ran out and I'm like, great, I'm going to go practice my Arabic. And so I remember going into like a Yemeni meat market and asking the guy behind the counter, "Hal anta maftuh?" So, for those of you that have any idea about that, that's a huge faux pas, right? But the point of this somewhat embarrassing story is that I was always willing to make a fool of myself, and for gaining practical experience, because actually there's for a new student, for me, Fatih and Maftuh, they were all the same. I mean, I had just bought this book. I have no idea about grammar. I'm like, all right, they both mean open, right? So, hal anta maftuh. And of course, the reaction that I got from the guy was like, what the hell's wrong with you? And so those experiences allowed me to learn through making mistakes. And so a lot of times I see an almost an almost crippling shyness on the part of students to not engage, Arabic speakers. It doesn't help that what's weird is that sometimes you will find some native speakers that when you speak to them in Arabic, they only reply back to you in English, no matter your level of proficiency. This still happens to me. And so all you could do is just say, hey, brother, or in the case of a woman, sister, I would like to practice some of my Arabic. So, don't immediately respond to me, in English. So I would say that there's an important part of that. Somewhat related to that is the listening skills. So we become so akin to reading on, especially, on a book, like reading type. And of course, this is the goal, right? We want to be able to read these books. We want to be able to read the Quran, read the books of Ahadith. We want to be able to read the books of fiqh, and on and on. Yes, okay, that's great. But an important component of your development as an Arabic speaker is to be able to listen, right? And and when I first started out, so the nice part about the Orange book series is that it came with these cassette tapes. Now, granted, this is back in 1991. There was no internet. There was nothing, right? There was no internet. There wasn't anything. And so sorry, I had looks like I was going to do an update. There was no internet. There was none of that. There was no YouTube, right? And so all I had was these, old cassette tapes. And back in the day, I used to drive a cab. So I'd be driving around my cab and I'd have this little Radio Shack, tape deck that I would play because the cab itself only had a radio, had no cassette deck, no CD player, no nothing. And so I would play these and listen. Of course, now we have YouTube, of which there is just almost uncountable amounts of resources that are available for you to listen to. So I highly encourage people hey, just listen to the news, listen to a scholarly lecture, listen to see, who cares if you listen to a 45-minute lecture and you only understood 5 words, right? My challenge for you would be, okay, great that you understood those 5 words. What were 5 other words that you didn't know the meanings of, but you could pick out from what the person was saying? And then you can look those up, because I think one of the most underrated skill sets that all of these ASL books, right, whether we're talking the Orange book, the Medina book, the Al-Kitab or Al-Arabiya Andana, whatever those books are, that they tend to focus on grammar rules, which are of course important, but they sort of sacrifice not only vocabulary, but very practical vocabulary. And so to that, therefore, if you're going to use the Medina series, I'm not saying don't use the Medina series. I'm not saying don't use Al-Kitab or whatever these other books are. I'm not saying don't use any of those books. What I'm saying is you have to know how to use those books, and more importantly, what are their limitations. So if, in the beginning, and I just wrote something, you can check it out on my Substack. In the beginning, a book is like a tool. And for the very adept, for the very beginner, for the mubtadi, it can be a useful tool. But after a time, that tool can actually become a crutch to further development. And so you have to know, and I think it's a pretty short window of when the Medina series books or any other series of books, when you got what you could squeeze out of them of the juice, it's time to move on. It's time to move on. And most importantly, it isn't always time to move on to another book. So, somebody asked me the other day, what are the books that I recommend? Well, okay, I can give some books that I can recommend. Obviously, I'm always buying books. My house is pretty much built upon books. But at some point, you're going to have to go out and build your own vocabulary. And that's, I think, that's where the book becomes, at some point, I think not short after the introductory stage, even to the intermediate stage, that the book becomes an impediment to developing other skills that you can only get on your own. So that's one reason why I have all these books, is because I do read voraciously to constantly expand my vocabulary, refresh my vocabulary, see how things are used in different contexts, because, different writers have different voices and they write in different ways. And so I feel that don't be afraid to, take that beginner book. All right, this is a verb and the sign of a verb. This is a noun and the sign of a noun. And I can conjugate a verb in the past tense and the present tense and in the command voice and on and on and on. And now you're going to need to go learn things like morphology or sarf, so you can see how words, when you have, Fatiha, Fatih, Maftuh, Miftaha, on and on and on, right? They're all related to this Fatiha in the, those 3 letters, in the root, and so on and so on. And so you can then begin to build pattern recognition. That's extremely important in any language, of gaining pattern recognition. And so utilize the incredible resource of YouTube to listen. The internet is a massive resource of, almost, again, countless books you can download in PDFs. Utilize all those resources and try to have, try to engage people in conversation, even if you embarrass yourself, as I did and still occasionally do. But I think more than anything else, you have to be tenacious. It has to be something that you desperately want. If you are not of the personality type for me, learning a language was never a matter of desperation, but rather it's something that deeply fulfills me. I love writing. I love studying language. It's something that deeply fulfills me. So I will do it reflexively, automatically, compared to if you don't have that, then you have to develop a tenacity of trying to meet your goals. So that's the best that I can recommend. Maybe at some point I'll throw up a few books, but like I said, I think in the beginning you can start with almost anything. I mean, I certainly started with the Orange book, which is by no means like the most fantastic book, but it quickly got me on my way. So I'll try to continue to leave some more ideas and tips and tricks here, inshallah, for those of you who are learning. And then perhaps if there's enough people with enough serious interest, I'll teach another class on Arabic. It takes a lot of energy and effort to teach and a lot of preparation. And to be quite frankly, the last couple of times that I did, the interest in people just simply, the conviction, I should say. Everybody was really interested, but first week the number was here, then second week, then third week, then fourth week, and then, it's just simply not my time to teach one person individually. So we gained enough interest, inshallah, perhaps I'll do it again. But I think there's a great many resources today that you can use on your own. Just you have to develop the habit for it and the desire for it if you don't have the innate inclination for it. So, alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man wala.